I killed my son on a Tuesday. Or at least, that is what my husband tells me, while he gently washes the conditioner from my hair with the devotion of a saint cleaning a religious relic. Silence hanging heavy between us like a wet wool blanket. He hums a soft, nameless lullaby, his fingers massaging my scalp with a tenderness that feels far too precise for a man scrubbing the invisible blood of a tragedy from his wife's confused memory. His touch lingering on my temples, where the headaches always start. I sit paralyzed in the clawfoot porcelain tub, the water turning lukewarm against my skin, like a baptism of ice that fails to wash away the sins he says I committed. My eyes fixed on the condensation dripping down the cold marble tiles. The faint purple bruises blooming on my upper arms are not from the steering wheel of a crashed car, as the police report suggests. They are from the velvet-lined leather restraints Adrian calls necessary safety measures for my night terrors. I will learn to swallow his bitter blue pills without swallowing his poisonous lies. Because the monster in this house does not hide under the bed. He sleeps beside me in Egyptian cotton sheets. You know that feeling when you wake up from a vivid nightmare, where the edges of reality are blurred and your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. But in my case, the nightmare does not end when I open my eyes because the architect of my fear is holding my hand. Imagine your mind is a beautiful stained glass window depicting your happiest memories. And then imagine someone took a hammer to it, shattered it into a million jagged shards, and then graciously offered to glue it back together, but rearrange the pieces to form a grotesque image you do not recognize. That is what Dr. Adrian Hale, the renowned psychiatrist and author of the best-selling book Healing the Broken Mind, has done to me under the guise of treatment, transforming our sprawling Victorian estate in the quiet hills of Connecticut into a sterile sanatorium where I am the only patient. I used to be a painter who captured the chaotic beauty of sunlight on water, a woman who laughed loud enough to startle the birds. But now I am a ghost haunting my own life, a fragile creature who needs permission to walk into the garden. You might look at the fresh flowers on the nightstand and see love, but I see a reminder of the funeral I was too sedated to attend. A constant reinforcement of the guilt that Adrian feeds me 3 times a day with a glass of water and a sympathetic smile. He tells the world he sacrificed his career to care for his unstable wife. But the truth is that he did not sacrifice anything. He simply found the perfect canvas for his twisted masterpiece of control. Yet he forgets that even a broken mind can sometimes find a sharp shard of glass among the ruins. The bathroom door creaks open with the agonizing slowness of a theatrical curtain rising, revealing Adrian standing there with a plush towel warmed on the radiator. His silhouette framed by the hallway light, like a savior descending from heaven to rescue a sinner. He wraps me in the fabric, his movements choreographed to project maximum empathy, drying my shivering shoulders, while he whispers that the neighbors are sending casseroles again. As if the pity of strangers is a form of currency he is eager to collect. I let him guide me to the bedroom, my feet sinking into the thick carpet that muffles every sound in this house, creating an atmosphere of suffocating quiet that feels less like peace and more like the stillness of a crypt. The room smells of lavender and old paper, a combination that used to comfort me but now triggers a Pavlovian response of nausea. Because lavender is what he sprays on my pillow to induce the heavy, dreamless sleep that steals hours of my life. He sits me down at the vanity table, the same place where I used to apply lipstick before date nights. But now the mirror reflects a stranger with hollow cheeks and eyes that look permanently startled. A hollow shell of the woman who used to dance in the kitchen. Adrian picks up a silver hairbrush, the bristles moving through my damp hair in a rhythmic cadence that matches the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Counting down the seconds of my imprisonment, he catches my gaze in the mirror, his blue eyes warm and reassuring, and says that I am making progress. That today I didn't ask about Toby, which he claims is a sign of acceptance. But deep down, in a locked room of my mind, I know I didn't ask because I was afraid he would rewrite the answer again. He reaches into the pocket of his cashmere cardigan and produces the small amber bottle that dictates the rhythm of my existence. Shaking out 2 blue pills into his palm with the practiced ease of a magician preparing a trick. For the anxiety. "Clara," he says softly. His voice a velvety baritone that has charmed donors and mesmerized audiences at medical conferences. A voice that sounds like safety until you listen to the underlying frequency of command. I take the pills, placing them on my tongue, and reach for the glass of water he offers. My hand trembling not from weakness, but from the sheer effort of suppressing the urge to throw the water in his face. I drink, feeling the cool liquid slide down my throat, and I open my mouth to show him it's empty. A humiliating ritual we perform nightly to ensure his subject is properly sedated. He smiles, a genuine expression of satisfaction that chills me to the bone, and kisses my forehead. A gesture that feels less like affection and more like a seal of ownership stamped onto my skin. As the chemicals begin to dissolve into my bloodstream, blurring the sharp edges of my perception, I look past him towards the window where the moonlight bleeds through the curtains, illuminating the empty space in the corner where Toby's crib used to be before Adrian moved it to the storage unit, claiming it was too painful for me to see. But the pain is not in the furniture. The pain is in the missing pieces of the story. The gaps in the timeline that he fills with his smooth narration. Telling me I was driving. Telling me I was drunk. Telling me I drifted into the oncoming lane. But my hands remember the texture of the passenger seat, not the steering wheel. The drug takes hold swiftly, pulling me down into a gray fog where thoughts move like molasses. But before I surrender to the artificial oblivion, my eyes catch a glint of something metallic under the heavy oak dresser. A tiny anomaly in the perfectly curated order of Adrian's world. It is a flash of red, vibrant and undeniable against the dark wood floor, calling to me through the haze of sedation like a lighthouse beacon cutting through a storm. Adrian is busy adjusting the thermostat, humming that same tune, his back turned to me with the arrogance of a jailer who believes his prisoner is already asleep. I slide my hand down the side of the bed, my fingers stretching, straining, fighting the lethargy that weighs down my limbs like lead, desperate to touch something real before the darkness swallows me whole. My fingertips graze cold metal, and I hook it, dragging it silently across the carpet until I can close my fist around it, the sharp edges digging into my palm, grounding me in the physical world. It is a toy car, a beat-up red Hot Wheels racer with chipped paint on the hood, the one Toby refused to sleep without, the one Adrian said was crushed in the wreckage along with everything else I loved. I pull it under the covers, pressing it against my chest, feeling the irregular heartbeat thumping against the cold metal. And suddenly, a crack appears in the smooth, flawless wall of memory Adrian has built. If the car is here, whole and uncrushed, then the wreckage he described in such graphic detail might not exist. And if the wreckage is a lie, then the blood on my hands is just paint he put there to keep me afraid. I lie still, feigning the deep, rhythmic breathing of the medicated sleep he expects, while my mind races with a clarity that defies the sedatives. Fueled by a surge of adrenaline that tastes like copper and rage, Adrian extinguishes the bedside lamp, plunging the room into shadow, and climbs into bed beside me, his body heat radiating across the mattress, a suffocating proximity that makes my skin crawl. He drapes an arm over my waist, a heavy weight that pins me down, and whispers, "Good night, my love," into the darkness, confident that he is holding a broken doll who will wake up tomorrow grateful for his guidance. But he is wrong, because the woman holding the red car under the blanket is not the patient he created. She is the mother he tried to erase, and she is wide awake. I close my eyes, not to sleep, but to remember, pushing past the artificial fog he planted. Searching for the true sensory details of that Tuesday, the smell of rain on asphalt, the sound of tires screeching, the feeling of the passenger seatbelt locking against my chest. The memory is there, buried under layers of suggestion and fear, waiting to be excavated. And tonight, with this small, chipped toy as my shovel, I have started digging my way out of the grave he dug for me. The morning sun bleeds through the heavy velvet curtains like a fresh wound in the gray sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the bedroom floor where I have lain awake for hours, my hand cramping around the sharp metal edges of the toy car hidden beneath the duvet. Adrian is still asleep, his breathing rhythmic and untroubled, a peaceful counterpoint to the chaotic storm raging inside my chest. And I take a moment to study his face, the handsome features that the world adores, searching for the crack in the porcelain mask where the monster lives. I have to move. I have to hide this small, red piece of evidence before he wakes up and resumes his role as the benevolent warden of my life. So I slide out of bed with the slow, deliberate movements of a thief, the carpet muffling my footsteps as I creep toward the vanity table. My reflection in the mirror is a ghost I barely recognize, pale and gaunt. But there is a new fire burning in the eyes that used to be dull with sedation. A spark of defiance ignited by the cold reality of the toy in my palm. I crouch down, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and tape the car to the underside of the lowest drawer. A hiding place so simple it might just escape the notice of a man who believes he has already scrubbed this house clean of the past. As the tape sticks, sealing my secret away, I feel a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle change in the air pressure that tells me the master of the house is stirring, and I rush back to the bed, slipping under the covers just as Adrian shifts and groans, his arm reaching out instinctively for the wife he thinks he owns. Breakfast is a performance art piece titled Domestic Bliss, staged in our sun-drenched kitchen where the smell of freshly brewed Colombian coffee fails to mask the lingering scent of my own fear. Adrian places a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me, the yellow fluff perfectly cooked, and smiles that practiced. Camera-ready smile that used to make my knees weak but now makes my stomach turn. "Eat up, darling," he says, his voice dripping with a cloying sweetness that feels like syrup pouring over an open sore. "You need your strength for the big day coming up." I force a forkful of eggs into my mouth, the taste turning to ash on my tongue, and I look at him with wide, innocent eyes, playing the part of the confused invalid he has so carefully constructed. "The big day," I ask, my voice trembling just enough to satisfy his need for dominance. And he leans across the marble island, his hand covering mine, his skin warm and dry against my clammy flesh. "The book launch, Clara," he explains patiently, as if talking to a slow child. "My publisher insists you be there, standing by my side. A living testament to the power of healing and forgiveness." I feel bile rise in my throat at the thought of being paraded in front of flashing cameras, a trophy of his successful treatment. But I nod obediently, swallowing the rage along with the eggs, because a rebellious wife gets locked in her room. But a compliant wife might just get a moment of freedom. He squeezes my hand, pleased with my submission, and drops the bombshell I have been waiting for. "I think you're ready for a small outing today. Perhaps a trip to the market for flowers, just to get you used to the crowds again." The local market is a sensory assault, a riot of colors and noises that feels overwhelming after months of silence and gray walls. But I welcome the chaos because it drowns out the constant, critical monologue Adrian has planted in my head. He drops me off at the entrance, his sleek black sedan idling like a predator waiting in the bushes, and tells me I have 20 minutes. Checking his watch with a stern look that reminds me the leash is long but not infinite, I walk through the stalls, the scent of ripe peaches and blooming lilies filling my lungs, feeling the eyes of the townspeople on me, their whispers reaching my ears like the rustling of dry leaves. That's poor Clara Hale, they murmur, the one who killed her boy. And I shrink inside my coat, not from shame, but from the realization of how thorough Adrian's narrative has become. I stop at a flower stall, my fingers brushing against the velvety petals of a white rose, when a hand touches my shoulder, startling me so badly I nearly knock over a vase. I spin around to face Mrs. Higgins, an elderly neighbor with kind eyes and a mouth that always moved a little too fast for her own good. "Clara," she gasps, her grip on my arm surprisingly strong. "I haven't seen you since." "Well, since that terrible night." I try to pull away, mindful of the ticking clock and Adrian's watching eyes. But she leans in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that freezes the blood in my veins. "I always wanted to tell you," she says, glancing nervously at the street. "I saw the car that night, coming up the hill, swerving like a madman. And I thought to myself, Adrian must be in a terrible hurry, or terribly drunk." The world stops spinning for a second, the noise of the market fading into a dull roar as her words sink in, shattering the glass foundation of my reality. "Adrian," I stammer, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. "Are you sure it was Adrian driving, Mrs.?" Higgins nods vigorously, her gray curls bouncing. "Oh yes, dear. I saw his silhouette clearly under the street lamp. And I saw you in the passenger seat, your head slumped against the window like you were asleep." Before I can ask more, a horn honks aggressively from the curb, 2 short blasts that I know better than my own name. I look up to see Adrian's car inching forward, his face behind the windshield a mask of impatience. And Mrs. Higgins recoils, patting my arm quickly before disappearing into the crowd like a frightened sparrow. I walk back to the car, my legs feeling like they are made of wood, clutching a bouquet of white roses that suddenly feel like funeral flowers. I slide into the passenger seat, the leather cold against my legs, and Adrian looks at me, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of a crack in the facade. "Who was that?" he asks, his tone casual but his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Just a neighbor offering condolences." I lie, forcing my voice to remain steady. "She said the flowers were beautiful." He relaxes slightly, putting the car in gear. "But the seed has been planted, and it is growing fast, wrapping its roots around my heart and squeezing until I can barely breathe." Back at the house, the silence is heavier than before, charged with the electricity of the secret I am now carrying. A secret that could get me killed or set me free. Adrian goes to his study to take a call, leaving me alone in the foyer. And instead of going upstairs to rest as he ordered, I find my feet moving toward the garage. The air in there is stale and smells of gasoline and rubber. But underneath it all, there is a faint, sickly sweet odor that tugs at a memory I cannot quite reach. I walk over to the luxury sedan we use now. Not the one from the accident. But my eyes are drawn to a pile of old boxes in the corner, covered in a tarp. I lift the edge of the heavy canvas, revealing a stack of Adrian's old coats, the ones he claimed he donated to charity months ago. I pick up his favorite trench coat, the beige one he wore that night, and bury my face in the fabric, inhaling deeply, searching for the olfactory evidence that Mrs. Higgins' story is true. It smells of dust and cedar. But there, clinging to the collar like a stubborn ghost, is the undeniable, pungent aroma of stale scotch and vomit. I drop the coat as if it were on fire, stumbling back, my hand covering my mouth to stifle a sob of realization. He was drunk. He was driving. He crashed the car. And then, while I was unconscious. He rewrote the script, casting me as the villain and himself as the tragic hero. The sound of the door opening behind me is like a gunshot, and I spin around to find Adrian standing in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the light, his face in shadow. "Clara," he asks, his voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing down here? I am trapped, cornered in the dark with the man who murdered my son and stole my mind. And I know that one wrong word will send me back to the locked room and the heavy sedation." I force a smile, a grotesque imitation of the wife he wants, and point to a gardening trowel on the shelf. I just wanted to see if I could plant the roses myself," I stammer, "to connect with the earth, like you said in your book." He steps closer, stepping into the pool of light from the single overhead bulb, and I can see the suspicion etched into the lines of his forehead. He reaches out, his fingers brushing a smudge of dust from my cheek, his touch making my skin crawl. "You're trembling, Clara," he observes, his eyes drilling into mine, dissecting my thoughts. "And your pupils are dilated." He takes my wrist, checking my pulse, and I have to use every ounce of willpower to keep from pulling away and screaming the truth in his face. "It's just the excitement of the outing," I whisper, leaning into his touch. "I'm just tired, Adrian, so tired." He holds my gaze for a second longer, a predator deciding whether to strike or play with its food, before finally nodding. "Go upstairs," he commands. "I'll bring your medicine." As I walk past him, I know the game has changed. He suspects something, and I am running out of time. I need proof, undeniable proof, before the gala, or I will disappear into the fog forever. The pill sits on my tongue like a bitter seed of compliance, dissolving slowly as Adrian watches me with the hawk-like intensity of a man guarding a vault, his hand resting casually on the doorframe as if to block any thought of escape. I swallow a mouthful of stale water, tilting my head back to mimic the act of surrender he craves, allowing the blue coating to stain the roof of my mouth while I tuck the chemical shackle safely beneath my tongue. "Sleep well, Clara," he whispers, the lock clicking shut with a finality that used to sound like protection but now sounds like a sentence, leaving me alone in the tomb of our bedroom. I rush to the bathroom sink, spitting out the dissolving lie into the porcelain basin, watching the blue streak swirl down the drain like a toxic vein, washing away his control 1 milligram at a time. The house is silent, holding its breath, until the muffled sound of his voice drifts up from the floorboards below. A smooth, rehearsed baritone that signals he is broadcasting his genius to the world, leaving his fortress unguarded. I stare at my reflection, the water dripping from my chin like sweat, and realize that tonight I am not a patient. I am an infiltrator in my own home. I open the bedroom door with the delicacy of a bomb diffuser, wincing as the hinges groan, a low protest that sounds deafening in the stillness. My bare feet testing every inch of the hallway carpet for squeaky floorboards. Downstairs, Adrian's voice resonates from his study, amplified by a high-quality microphone, lecturing an invisible audience about the fragility of the human psyche while he actively dismantles mine upstairs. "Trauma is a labyrinth," he says, his tone dripping with faux empathy. And I descend the staircase one step at a time, timing my movements to the rhythm of his speech, a ghost haunting the edges of his spotlight. The air gets cooler as I approach the sanctuary of his intellect, the smell of old books and expensive scotch growing stronger, a masculine scent that masks the rot beneath the surface. I pause at the threshold, peering through the crack in the door, watching him gesture to a webcam with the charisma of a cult leader, completely absorbed in the adoration of strangers, unaware that the subject of his case study is standing 10 feet away, wide awake and armed with the truth. He announces a brief intermission to his listeners, claiming he needs to fetch a reference book. But I know the sound of ice hitting glass too well. He is going to the wet bar in the kitchen to refuel his arrogance. This is my window, a sliver of time carved out of his thirst. And I press myself into the shadows of the alcove as he passes, the hem of his robe brushing against my bare toes, closer than a blade to the skin. Once his footsteps recede on the kitchen tile, I slip into the study, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a whisper that gets lost in the hum of his computer server. The room is a shrine to his ego. Walls lined with framed degrees and photos of him shaking hands with dignitaries. But I ignore the trophies and drop to my knees beside the antique bookshelf in the corner. I know him. I know his need to keep trophies of his conquests not on the walls, but hidden in the dark where only he can admire them. Just like he keeps me. I run my hands over the floorboards beneath the Persian rug, feeling for the loose panel he thinks I forgot about. The one where Toby used to hide his candy. The one Adrian now uses to hide his sins. My fingernails catch the edge of the wood, prying it up with a desperate strength that breaks the skin, revealing a hollow space filled with dust and a stack of microcassettes labeled with dates and names. My heart stops as I read the labels. Written in his meticulous, spidery handwriting, Subject 304, Reprogramming Phase 1. Subject 304, Resistance Levels. And finally, the one that makes my blood run cold. The accident raw data. I snatch the cassette, my hands trembling so violently I almost drop it back into the darkness. Knowing that this small plastic rectangle holds the voice of the woman I used to be, the woman who knew the truth before he erased her. I glance at the desk, where his professional dictaphone sits like a waiting judge, and I make a reckless decision, inserting the tape and pressing play, needing to hear it, needing to be sure before he returns. The tape hisses, a sound like white noise from a dead channel, and then my own voice cuts through the silence. Not the whisper I use now, but a scream of primal agony. You were drunk. You killed him. You killed my baby. The recording shifts, his voice calm and soothing, overlaying my screams with a hypnotic chant. You are confused. Clara, you are in shock. Remember the wine you drank? Remember the wheel in your hands? The sound of ice clinking against glass in the hallway shatters the moment, snapping me back to the terrifying present where I am a trespasser in the lion's den. I eject the tape with a frantic thumb, shoving it deep into the pocket of my robe, and slam the floorboard back into place, smoothing the rug over the seam just as the shadow of his feet appears under the door gap. There is nowhere to run. No time to reach the stairs without being seen. So I scramble into the narrow crawl space behind his heavy velvet drapes, pressing my body flat against the cold window pane. The door handle turns, the brass mechanism clicking loudly, and Adrian walks back in, humming that same cursed lullaby, the smell of fresh scotch and lime preceding him like a warning cloud. He sits at his desk, the leather chair groaning under his weight, and I hold my breath until my lungs burn, praying that he cannot hear the thunderous pounding of my heart from 3 feet away. I watch through the slit in the fabric as he picks up the dictaphone, his thumb hovering over the play button. And for a second, I think he knows. I think he can smell my terror in the air. He clears his throat, the sound magnified in the silence, and slides his headphones back on, returning to his virtual audience with the ease of a sociopath flipping a switch. Sorry for the delay. He croons into the microphone. Sometimes we must pause to reflect on our own demons. And while he is distracted by his own reflection in the monitor, I slide out from behind the curtain, moving like a shadow across the carpet. I slip through the door just as he swivels his chair, freezing for a split second before realizing he is looking at his bookshelf. Not at me. I make it to the stairs, ascending on legs that feel like jelly, and collapse onto my bed just as the adrenaline crash hits me. Clutching the plastic tape in my pocket like a holy relic, I have the weapon. I have the voice. I have the truth. But as I lie there, feigning sleep, waiting for him to come check on his prisoner, I realize the hardest part is not finding the gun, but pulling the trigger while staring into the eyes of the man I once loved. The microcassette, a small rectangle of black plastic that holds the nuclear code to destroy my husband's life, feels heavy and cold against my skin as I tape it securely to the inside of the hollow brass curtain rod above the window. A hiding place so high and obscure that Adrian would never think to look there unless he decided to dismantle the house. I slide the finial back into place, the metallic scrape sounding like a scream in the morning silence, and step down from the chair just seconds before the heavy oak door to the bedroom creaks open, signaling the arrival of the warden. I am already sitting at the vanity, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs that I pray he cannot hear, running a brush through my hair with slow, hypnotic strokes that mimic the lethargy he expects from his medicated wife. Adrian enters with a steaming cup of herbal tea, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a crime scene investigator, looking for anything out of place, any shadow that shouldn't be there, any sign that his perfect specimen has been contaminated by the truth. "You look flushed, Clara," he observes, placing the tea on the marble coaster with a deliberate clink, his hand resting on my shoulder, the heat of his palm seeping through my silk robe like a brand. I lean into his touch, forcing my body to remain limp and pliable, fighting the primal urge to recoil and vomit at the contact. I had a nightmare. I lie, my voice a raspy whisper that sounds genuinely terrified because the fear is real, even if the source is different. I dreamt I was lost in a maze, and I could hear you calling me, but I couldn't find the door. He smiles, a satisfied curve of his lips that chills my blood, and strokes my hair. That's just the trauma leaving the body. My love, you have to trust the process. Trust me. He watches me drink the tea, his gaze lingering on my throat as I swallow, checking for compliance, testing the invisible leash he has wrapped around my neck. "I heard a noise last night," he says casually, too casually, while adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror, watching my reflection instead of his own. Downstairs, near the study, like a floorboard creaking, my stomach drops, a sensation of freefall that makes the room spin. But I force my face to remain a mask of vacant confusion, widening my eyes just enough to look innocent but not guilty. Maybe it was the wind, I suggest, adding a tremor to my voice. Or maybe it was the ghost of the boy. I thought I heard a baby crying again. The mention of the hallucination, a symptom he implanted, works perfectly, shifting his suspicion from my actions to my illness. He relaxes, the tension in his jaw unclenched. Because a crazy wife hearing ghosts is manageable, but a sane wife hearing secrets is dangerous. "There are no ghosts, Clara," he says firmly, kissing the top of my head with a condescending pity. "Only memories playing tricks. Which is why we need to increase your dosage before the gala, just to be safe." He leaves for the hospital, the sound of his car engine fading down the driveway. And for the first time in months, I do not feel relief at his absence. I feel a cold, calculating purpose settling in my chest like a stone. I am not safe. But neither is he, because he just admitted that he is afraid of noises in the dark, and I am about to become the noise he cannot silence. I do not go back to bed. Instead, I walk straight to the library, a room I have avoided because Adrian said reading would strain my fragile mind. But today I am not looking for fiction. I am looking for the manual. I pull down his own book, The Architecture of Control Advanced Hypnotherapy, the leather binding creaking in my hands, and sit cross-legged on the floor, devouring the pages with the hunger of a starving animal. I read about pacing and leading, the technique of matching a subject's rhythm before redirecting it. I read about anchoring, the art of linking a physical touch or sound to a specific emotional state. I read about gaslighting, though he uses clinical terms like reality reconstruction. Every page is a slap in the face, a detailed blueprint of how he dismantled my personality, piece by piece, turning my grief into guilt and my memories into madness. I see the notes in the margins, his handwriting detailing specific triggers he used on me, the smell of lavender to induce sleep, the ticking of a metronome to induce compliance, the phrase "you know" to bridge his lies to my trust. Tears stream down my face, hot and angry. But I do not wipe them away. I let them fall on the pages, staining his words with my pain, transforming his academic achievements into a personal declaration of war. I realize that I cannot beat him with physical strength, for he is stronger. And I cannot beat him with the law yet, for he is the expert witness. So I must beat him at his own game. I must become the hypnotist and make him the subject. The afternoon sun shifts across the floorboards as I close the book, my mind buzzing with a new language. The language of manipulation. I decide to start small, to plant a seed of fear in his subconscious, utilizing the concept of the guilty verify, which states that a guilty mind will always look for confirmation of its crime. I go to the kitchen and prepare dinner, a rich beef stew that fills the house with a comforting aroma. But I set the table with a deliberate error, 3 place settings instead of 2. I place a small, child-sized spoon at the 3rd empty spot. Not the silver one Toby used, but a generic one that will just barely catch his peripheral vision. I also change the playlist on the house sound system, burying a low-frequency sound, a recording of a car screeching, slowed down by 800%, so it sounds like a distant, ominous moan underneath the layers of classical jazz he loves. It is subtle, barely audible. But according to page 204 of his book, the subconscious mind picks up what the conscious ear misses. I stand in the middle of the kitchen, breathing in the scent of rosemary and thyme, feeling like a witch brewing a poison that has no antidote, waiting for the monster to come home and eat. When Adrian returns, he is tired, the stress of the upcoming gala etching deep lines around his eyes, and he throws his coat onto the chair with a heavy sigh. "Something smells good," he mutters, loosening his tie, and walks into the dining room, stopping dead in his tracks when he sees the table. His eyes fixate on the 3rd setting, the small spoon gleaming under the chandelier, and I watch him from the doorway, my heart rate steady, my breathing calm. "Clara," he asks, his voice tight, "why is there a 3rd place I walk over?" Picking up the spoon with an air of genuine surprise, playing the role of the forgetful invalid to perfection. "Oh," I say, blinking rapidly. I don't know. I must have been on autopilot. I'm sorry, Adrian. I'll take it away." I snatch the spoon, acting flustered, but I see the shadow pass over his face, a flicker of unease that tells me the anchor has snagged. We sit down to eat, and the slowed-down audio track begins to play. The low, groaning drone vibrating through the floorboards, almost imperceptible, but deeply unsettling. Adrian stops chewing, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth, tilting his head as if listening to a frequency only dogs can hear. "Do you hear that?" he asks, looking at the ceiling, looking at the walls. "Hear what?" "Darling," I ask, cutting my meat with surgical precision. "I only hear the music." "Isn't it the jazz album you love?" He rubs his temples, the seed of doubt blooming behind his eyes, wondering if his own mind is starting to fray, or if the house itself is rejecting him. I spend the rest of the meal practicing mirroring, copying his body language exactly when he drinks. I drink when he leans back. I lean back, but with a delay of 3 seconds. A technique his book says creates a subconscious feeling of mockery and dissonance. He becomes increasingly agitated, shifting in his chair, unable to pinpoint why he feels so uncomfortable in his own castle, while I offer him more wine with a smile that doesn't quite reach my eyes. "You seem tense," I soothe, reaching out to touch his hand, using the exact same pressure he uses on me, reclaiming the gesture of control. "It's just the pressure," he snaps, pulling his hand away. "And this house. It feels different tonight. The air is too heavy." I nod sympathetically. "Maybe it's the guilt," I say softly, the word hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. He freezes, staring at me with wide, shocked eyes. "What did you say?" I look at him innocently, tilting my head. "The guilt. About the book launch. Worrying if it will be perfect." "Isn't that what you meant?" he exhales. A long, shaky breath, convincing himself he misheard. But I know he didn't. The internal shift is complete. I am no longer the mouse in the maze. I am the architect of the walls. And tonight, I have just locked the first door behind him. Night descends upon the estate like a heavy velvet shroud, suffocating the last gasp of twilight under a blanket of oppressive darkness. And the silence in our bedroom is amplified by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds of a life I am no longer living. Adrian is restless tonight, his body twitching under the sheets as the residual frequency of the distorted audio track I played at dinner continues to vibrate in his subconscious, a ghostly echo that his rational mind cannot purge. I lie perfectly still beside him, my breathing shallow and regulated to mimic the deep, chemically induced coma he believes I am in, while under my tongue, the blue pill dissolves slowly, not swallowed. A bitter secret I will spit into the sink the moment he falls asleep. The blue light from his laptop screen cuts through the dark, illuminating his face in a ghostly pallor, highlighting the deep furrows of stress etched into his forehead as he furiously types the final revisions of his gala speech. I watch him through the slit of my eyelids, my body limp but my mind coiled like a viper, waiting for the moment of vulnerability that exhaustion always brings to the arrogant. He sighs, a sound of frustration and fatigue, and rubs his temples with the heel of his hand, the very hand that steered our car into tragedy. Before his fingers return to the keyboard to type the password that guards his digital fortress, I focus all my attention on his fingers, memorizing the geometry of his movements rather than the letters themselves, watching the way his index finger strikes the keys with a forceful, angry cadence. He types a name. I recognize the pattern of the keys, TOBY, followed by a sequence of numbers that makes my heart stop in my chest. 0508, the date our son was born. A wave of nausea washes over me, a physical revulsion at his audacity to use the name of the victim as the key to lock away the evidence of his murder, turning our son's memory into a security measure. He hits enter with a decisive snap. The screen flashes to his desktop, and for a moment, I see the folder labeled Project Phoenix before he closes the lid, plunging the room back into shadow. He places the laptop on the nightstand, takes a long swig of water from the carafe, and finally lies back, pulling the duvet up to his chin as if shielding himself from the coldness of his own conscience. I wait, counting the breaths, counting the heartbeats, waiting for the distinct shift in his respiratory rhythm that signals the transition from wakefulness to the first stage of sleep. 10 minutes pass, then 20, and finally, his breathing deepens, a soft snore escaping his lips. a signal that the gatekeeper has left his post and the castle of his mind is left unguarded. I slide out of bed, my movements fluid and silent. A predator emerging from the camouflage of the sheets, and I creep around to his side of the bed, my bare feet making no sound on the thick Persian rug. I stand over him, looking down at the face of the man who stole my life, and for a second, I see the boy I once loved. But that boy is dead, buried under layers of narcissism and lies. I reach into the pocket of my silk robe and pull out a small vial of essential oil. Not the lavender he uses to sedate me, but jasmine, the scent that hung heavy in the air on the night of the accident. A scent I know is linked to his deepest trauma. I uncork the vial. The sweet, cloying aroma filling the small space between us, and I dab a single drop on the corner of his pillow, just close enough for him to inhale it with every breath. He stirs slightly, his nose twitching as the olfactory trigger hits his limbic system, bypassing logic and going straight to the center of fear. Now begins the whispering, the technique described on page 112 of his own book, where the subject is most suggestible during the REM cycle, allowing the operator to plant narratives directly into the dreamscape. I lean down, my lips inches from his ear, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin, and I begin to whisper, my voice a low, melodic hum that weaves into the fabric of his sleep. The road is wet. Adrian, I murmur, timing my words to his exhalation. Can you feel the rain on your face? He frowns in his sleep, his head turning slightly to the left, rejecting the image. But I persist. The rain is cold, and the whiskey is warm in your stomach, burning like fire. His hand twitches on the coverlet, grasping at the fabric as if gripping a steering wheel. And I know I have found the thread. You are driving too fast, I whisper, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of his own guilt. The lights are blurring, red and white, spinning like a carousel. A small whimper escapes his throat, a sound of distress that feeds the dark hunger in my chest. And I press closer. Look at the passenger seat. Adrian. Look at her. He shakes his head violently, a bead of sweat forming on his brow. But he cannot look away, because in his dream, he has no eyelids. She is sleeping. I continue. Relentless. She trusts you, and you are going to kill her boy. The atmosphere in the room grows heavy, charged with the energy of his nightmare, and I can almost see the scene playing out behind his rapidly moving eyes. The tree is coming, I whisper, harsh and sharp. The big oak tree on the curve. It's coming for you, Adrian gasps, his chest heaving, his legs kicking out as if slamming on invisible brakes. But I do not stop. I lean closer. You can't stop. The brakes are gone. The bottle is empty. And the crash is coming. I snap my fingers next to his ear. A sharp, cracking sound that mimics the breaking of bone. Crash. His body jolts. A violent spasm that nearly wakes him. But I soothe him back down with a terrifying gentleness. It's okay. Just rewrite it. Just erase it. Make her the driver. I am planting the seed of his own fraud, making his subconscious confront the effort of his lies. But the tape is running. I whisper. The final hook. The tape is always running. Adrian. Under the floorboards. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. He begins to toss and turn, trapped in a loop of his own making, mumbling incoherent words that sound like apologies and accusations mixed together in a slurry of panic. I step back into the shadows, watching my handiwork with a cold detachment, realizing that I am no longer just the victim. I am the director of his personal horror movie. I move to the laptop on the nightstand, my heart racing again. and gently lift the lid. The screen glowing to life, demanding the password. I type it in. TOBY0508. My fingers trembling not from fear but from anticipation. The screen unlocks, granting me access to the digital vault. And I quickly navigate to the Project Phoenix folder, expecting medical files. But what I find is far worse. It is a timeline, a detailed spreadsheet of my degradation, with projected dates for my total breakdown and institutionalization. He wasn't just hiding the accident, he was planning my disposal. I hear a gasp from the bed, a sound like a drowning man breaking the surface, and I snap the laptop shut, diving onto the floor on my side of the bed just as Adrian sits up, screaming. "No, the tree, he yells, his voice cracking with terror, his hands clawing at his throat as if strangling the scream. I count to 3, composing my face into a mask of sleepy concern, and sit up, reaching for him. "Adrian," I ask, my voice soft and confused. "Adrian, what's wrong?" He looks at me, his eyes wild and unseeing, his chest heaving, sweat soaking through his silk pajamas. "Clara," he gasps, grabbing my arm, his grip painful. "Did you hear it, the crash, the noise?" I pull him into a hug, feeling his heart hammering against my chest like a trapped bird. And I stroke his damp hair, playing the role of the comforter while holding the knife of truth behind my back. "Shh," I soothe, rocking him like a child. "It was just a dream, darling, just a bad dream." He buries his face in my neck, trembling, inhaling the scent of my skin, which I have carefully kept free of jasmine, creating a safe harbor from the storm I created. It felt so real. He whispers, his voice shaking. "I was driving, and there was rain, and I couldn't stop." I pull back slightly, looking into his eyes. "But you weren't driving, Adrian," I say, planting the double meaning. "I was the one driving. Remember, that's what you told me." He stares at me, confusion warring with relief in his gaze, his programming fighting against the nightmare I just installed. "Yes," he stammers. "Yes, you were driving. I just had a sympathetic reaction. That's all." He lies. Even in his vulnerability, he lies. But I see the crack in his iris, the doubt that is spreading like a virus. "Go back to sleep," I whisper, pushing him gently back onto the pillows. "I'll stay awake and watch over you." He nods, grateful, weak, closing his eyes, unaware that the watchman is the enemy. As his breathing evens out, returning to the troubled rhythm of a man haunted, I lie back down, staring at the ceiling, the image of the spreadsheet burning in my mind. He plans to institutionalize me next month, after the book tour. The deadline is real. The timeline is set. I don't have weeks to play with his mind. I have days. I need to copy the files from his laptop. I need to get the tape from the curtain rod. And I need to find a way to play it at the gala without him stopping me. I turn my head and look at the laptop again. I know the password now. But I need a device to transfer the data. And I need a way to get the audio file from the analog cassette onto a digital format. My eyes wander to the baby monitor in the bottom drawer of the nightstand. The one he never threw away because it was too painful, but which actually has a two-way audio function. An idea begins to form. A plan so risky it makes my hands sweat under the covers. If I can't use the PA system, I will use the one voice he can't silence. The rain begins to fall outside, tapping against the window pane. A rhythmic drumming that matches the whisper I planted in his ear. Red and white. I mouth silently to the darkness. Red and white. The game of cat and mouse is over. Now, We are two scorpions in a bottle, and only one of us is going to survive the sting. I close my eyes, not to sleep, but to rehearse the script for tomorrow. Because tomorrow, the dutiful wife is going to make a very special request for the gala. A request he won't be able to refuse because of the guilt I just cultivated. I drift into a light doze, dreaming not of monsters, but of justice. A justice that smells like jasmine and tastes like rain. The morning light filters through the sheer curtains with a pale, sickly pallor that matches the complexion of the man sitting across from me at the breakfast table. His hands trembling slightly as he lifts his coffee cup, the porcelain rattling against the saucer in a betrayal of his composure. Adrian looks like a man haunted. Dark violet crescents bruising the skin beneath his eyes. His usually impeccable hair slightly disheveled. The residue of a night spent wrestling with the demons I whispered into his ear. I butter my toast with the steady, rhythmic precision of a surgeon. The scraping sound loud in the oppressive silence. Watching him crumble under the weight of the seed I planted. Realizing that the Project Phoenix folder on his laptop is not just a plan. It is a desperate measure of a man losing control. He jumps when the toaster pops, his eyes darting to the corner of the room as if expecting to see the phantom car from his nightmare. And I hide a smile behind my napkin, savoring the taste of his fear, which is far sweeter than the strawberry jam. You didn't sleep well, I observe softly, my voice laced with a concern that is chemically pure in its falseness. Was it the dream again? He sets the cup down hard, splashing brown liquid onto the white tablecloth, a stain spreading like dried blood. It was nothing, he snaps, his voice hoarse, then softens, remembering his role. Just stress. Clara, the gala is tomorrow, and the technical team is incompetent. The presentation isn't ready. This is the opening, the crack in the armor I have been waiting for, the moment where his exhaustion outweighs his paranoia. I reach across the table and place my hand over his, feeling the cold clamminess of his skin. Let me help, I offer, widening my eyes to project innocent eagerness. You always said I had a good eye for visual pacing. Remember when I used to edit your lecture slides? He hesitates, his gaze drilling into me, searching for the trap. But all he sees is the submissive wife he created, desperate for a crumb of utility. It involves the audio files, he mutters, rubbing his temples, syncing the music to the emotional beats of my speech. It's tedious work. I squeeze his hand, anchoring the offer to a positive emotion. I can do it. Adrian. I can go to that little audio shop in town, the one that digitized your old lectures, and have them master the files for you. I hold my breath, the lie hanging in the air like a pendulum, waiting for gravity to pull it down. He looks at the clock, then at his shaking hands, and finally nods, the desire to be relieved of the burden overriding his instinct to keep me caged. Fine, he sighs, pulling a silver flash drive from his pocket. But be back by noon. Clara, and don't speak to anyone unnecessary. Your condition is fragile. I take the drive, the metal warm from his body, and I know I am holding the detonator. The town of Oakhaven feels different today. The air sharper, the colors more vivid, as if the veil of sedation has been fully lifted from my eyes, revealing the world in high definition. I drive Adrian's secondary car, a sedan that smells of leather and neglect, the cassette tape burning a hole in my purse, a physical weight that grounds me in reality. I park in front of Henderson's Electronics, a dusty storefront squeezed between a bakery and a dry cleaner, the kind of place that smells of solder and ozone, a relic of the analog age that Adrian despises but I find comforting. The bell above the door jingles with a cheerful dissonance as I enter, the sound waking old Mr. Henderson from his stupor behind the counter. his glasses thick as bottle bottoms. Mrs. Hale. He squints, recognizing me from a lifetime ago when I used to bring in Toby's broken remote-controlled cars. I haven't seen you in, well, since the Troubles. I flinch at the euphemism, but force a smile, placing the microcassette and the flash drive on the glass counter. I need a favor. Mr. Henderson, I say, my voice steady. I need this tape digitized and transferred to this drive, and I need the audio cleaned up, stripped of the background noise. He picks up the tiny tape, his frown deepening. This is an old format. Medical dictation mostly. What's on it? I lean in, lowering my voice. A memory. Mr. Henderson. Just a memory I need to preserve before it fades. He looks at me, really looks at me, and I wonder if he sees the bruises on my soul or just the expensive coat that hides them. But he nods slowly, sensing the urgency vibrating off me like heat waves. He shuffles to the back room, and I stand among the shelves of obsolete radios and tangled wires, listening to the hum of the machinery, a countdown clock ticking in my head. 10 minutes pass, agonizing and slow, before the sound of my own scream cuts through the air from the back room. Tinny and distorted but unmistakable. You killed him? The voice on the speaker shrieks, followed by Adrian's hypnotic drone. I freeze, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turn white, terrified that someone will walk in, that the police will drive by, that the universe will stop me. The audio stops abruptly, and Mr. Henderson emerges, his face pale, holding the flash drive as if it were radioactive. He places it on the counter, his hand trembling slightly. I cleaned it up. Mrs. Hale, he whispers, not meeting my eyes. The voice. It's very clear now. He knows. In that silence, in the dusty air of a dying shop, a pact is made. He pushes the drive toward me and pulls the original tape back. I made a backup copy, he murmurs, just in case the drive fails. You never know with digital. I look at him, tears stinging my eyes, realizing I have found my first ally in the unlikeliest of places. Thank you. I breathe, taking the drive. Send the bill to the clinic. No charge, he says, turning away to fiddle with a radio. Just be careful, Clara. Driving back to the estate, the flash drive sits in the passenger seat like a loaded gun, and I feel a surge of power that is almost intoxicating, a high that no pill could ever provide. I have the weapon, but now I need to load it into the chamber, which means accessing the presentation file on Adrian's laptop without triggering his suspicion. When I enter the house, the silence is waiting for me, heavy and suffocating. But Adrian is nowhere to be seen, likely retreated to the master bath to groom himself for his public adoration. I slip into the study, the smell of his scotch still lingering in the air, and plug the drive into his laptop, my fingers flying across the trackpad. I open the presentation file. The Hale method triumph over trauma. A slick slideshow of brain scans and inspirational quotes. I find the slide titled The Breakthrough, the climax of his speech where he usually plays uplifting music. I delete the music track. I drag and drop the file named Project Phoenix Audio, WAV into the slot, setting it to autoplay upon the slide transition. But that is not enough. I need to hide it. I change the icon of the audio file to match the background color, making it invisible to the naked eye, and bury it behind a large image of a neuron firing. I hear the heavy tread of footsteps on the stairs, the rhythmic approach of the enemy, and I quickly save the file, eject the drive, and lean back in the chair, feigning a casual posture just as the door opens. Adrian walks in, smelling of expensive cologne and mint, his eyes scanning the screen. Then me. "Is it done?" he asks, his voice tight with anxiety. "It's done," I say, standing up to give him the chair. I synced the new music. It flows perfectly. He sits down, clicking through the slides, and my heart stops as he reaches the breakthrough slide. He hovers over it, and for a terrifying second, I think he is going to play it to check the sound. "Did you use the Vivaldi track?" he asks, his finger poised over the mouse. "Yes." I lie, my voice smooth as silk. "The Four Seasons. Winter Movement. Just like you wanted." He nods, satisfied, and moves to the next slide without playing it, his arrogance blinding him to the details. "Good," he mutters. "At least you can still be useful." "Clara." He closes the laptop, sealing his fate inside the aluminum shell. "Go get dressed," he commands, not looking at me. "Wear the black dress. The high-neck one. It hides your frailty." I walk to the door, pausing at the threshold to look back at him, at the back of his head, at the man who plans to lock me away in 30 days. "Adrian," I say softly. He turns, impatient. "Do you believe in karma?" I ask. He laughs, a short, barking sound. "I believe in control. Clara, now go." Upstairs, in the cold sanctuary of the bathroom, I strip off my clothes, staring at the body he has claimed, the body he has drugged and restrained. I turn on the shower, the water running hot, steam filling the room, and I scrub my skin until it is red, washing away his touch, washing away the victim. I put on the black dress, the high collar feeling like a chokehold. But instead of feeling trapped, I feel armored. I am attending my own funeral today. Or rather, the funeral of the woman I used to be. I apply my makeup, hiding the dark circles, painting on a face of serene acceptance. I look at the small red toy car I taped under the drawer. I leave it there. I don't need it tonight. Tonight, I am the car. I am the crash. I am the inevitability of physics. I walk downstairs to find Adrian waiting by the door, checking his watch. "You're late," he snaps. "I'm ready," I reply. He opens the door, and the sunlight hits us, bright and blinding. He puts on his sunglasses. I keep my eyes open. We walk to the car. The real car, not the phantom one. He gets in the driver's seat. I get in the passenger seat. The engine roars to life. "Are you nervous?" he asks as we pull out of the driveway. "No," I say, looking out the window at the passing trees. "I'm just waiting for the music to start." The valet opens the car door with a flourish that feels more like a prison warden unlocking a cell than a gesture of service. And the humid night air rushes in to meet me, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes. I step out onto the red carpet, my heels sinking slightly into the plush fabric, and immediately the world explodes into a chaotic strobe light of camera flashes, blinding white bursts that burn after images of greedy faces into my retinas. Adrian grips my elbow, his fingers digging into the sensitive flesh of my inner arm with a pressure that communicates a clear warning to smile, while he waves to the paparazzi with the relaxed charm of a man who believes he owns the night. "Look at him," a photographer shouts, "the man who heals broken hearts." And I force the corners of my mouth upward into a brittle imitation of pride, feeling like a ventriloquist's dummy made of flesh and bone. The noise is deafening, a cacophony of shouted questions and clicking shutters. But underneath the din, I can hear the blood rushing in my ears, a turbulent river carrying the debris of my anxiety. I clutch my clutch bag against my stomach, feeling the hard outline of the backup flash drive through the satin. A small, cold comfort in case the technology fails. Though I know that if I have to use it, the element of surprise will be lost. We move toward the entrance of the grand hall. A gauntlet of judgment where every glance directed at me is weighted with pity or morbid curiosity. The crowd parting for us like the Red Sea. Not out of respect, but out of a desire to get a better look at the famous doctor's tragic wife. The ballroom is a cavern of crystal and velvet, illuminated by chandeliers that drip light like frozen tears, casting a golden glow over the hundreds of guests who are sipping champagne and trading gossip with the casual cruelty of the elite. The air is thick with the smell of lilies, funeral flowers. I note with a dark irony, and the murmur of conversation dies down as we enter, replaced by a ripple of whispers that follows us to our table near the stage. I feel naked in my high-necked black dress, exposed despite the layers of silk, because I know that, to them, I am not a person but a cautionary tale. A walking specimen of the trauma Adrian claims to cure. A waiter appears with a tray of crystal flutes, and Adrian takes two, handing one to me with a look that dares me to refuse. His eyes scanning the room to ensure our audience is captivated by his attentiveness. I take the glass, the condensation cold against my fingertips, and hold it like a shield, watching the bubbles rise and burst. A perfect metaphor for the fragile reality he has constructed around us. Stay close, he murmurs into my ear, his breath warm and smelling of mint. Doctor, Eris is here, and he wants to say hello. My stomach clenches at the name, Doctor. Eris is the colleague who signed my prescriptions without asking questions. The man who validated Adrian's diagnosis of my hysteria over a game of golf. Doctor. Eris approaches us with the rolling gait of a man who has had one too many scotches. His face flushed and his smile too wide. Extending a fleshy hand toward Adrian before turning his watery gaze on me. Clara. He booms, his voice too loud for the intimate setting. You look stabilized, my dear. Truly stabilized. I let him take my hand, his palm damp and limp, and I repress a shudder as he pats my knuckles with a condescending familiarity. Adrian tells me you've had a rough patch this week, he continues, leaning in closer. Hallucinations again. Yes, I look at Adrian, who is watching me with the predatory stillness of a hawk, waiting for me to crack, to deny it, to make a scene that would justify his plan to institutionalize me. Just bad dreams. Doctor, I say softly, lowering my eyes to play the part of the chastised child. Adrian has been very patient with me. Eris nods sagely, looking at Adrian with admiration. You're a saint. Hail. Truly a saint to bear such a burden. The word burden settles on my shoulders like a lead weight. But instead of crushing me, it fuels the fire in my gut. They talk over my head about dosages and treatment plans as if I were a piece of faulty machinery, unaware that the machine has malfunctioned and is currently counting down to a catastrophic explosion. I excuse myself to sit down, my legs trembling, not from weakness, but from the sheer effort of holding back the scream that is clawing at my throat. I take my seat at the VIP table, positioned directly to the right of the stage, giving me a clear view of the podium and the sleek black laptop that sits on a small stand next to the projector. The technical director, a young man with a headset and a nervous tic, is hovering over the device, checking the connections, and my heart stops as I see him reach for the trackpad. If he opens the file to check the audio levels, if he plays the Vivaldi track now, the game is over before it begins. I watch, paralyzed, as Adrian strides over to him, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder and saying something I cannot hear. But the body language is clear. Don't touch it. The boy nods, backing away, intimidated by the great doctor's authority. and Adrian leans down to check the screen himself. He clicks the mouse once, twice, verifying the slide order. And I grip the stem of my champagne glass so hard I fear it might snap. He hovers over the breakthrough slide, the cursor resting on the invisible audio file. And for a second, time stretches into an agonizing eternity. Then, he smiles, satisfied with his own genius, and steps back, leaving the laptop armed and ready. He turns to me and winks, a gesture of camaraderie that makes me want to vomit, unaware that he has just approved his own execution warrant. The lights dim, plunging the room into a hushed twilight, and a spotlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating Adrian as he takes the stage to thunderous applause. He looks magnificent, I have to admit, the very picture of wisdom and compassion. Standing tall in his tailored tuxedo, basking in the adoration of the crowd, he raises his hands for silence, the benevolent leader calming his flock, and begins to speak, his voice resonating through the high-quality sound system, rich and textured. We are gathered here to talk about pain, he begins, pacing the stage with deliberate, slow movements, the pain that breaks us, and the pain that rebuilds us. He looks directly at me, and the spotlight pivots, blinding me for a moment, forcing me to turn my face away, which the audience interprets as modesty, but is actually revulsion. My wife, Clara, he says, his voice thickening with emotion, knows this pain better than anyone. A collective sigh ripples through the room, a wave of sympathy for him, not for me. She lost our son, he continues, and the lie tastes bitter in the air, and in her grief. She lost herself. I dig my nails into my palms, using the physical pain to anchor myself, reciting the lyrics of the song I am about to play in my head. You were drunk. You killed him. He moves through the presentation, clicking the remote with the confidence of a conductor leading an orchestra, each slide displaying a brain scan or a statistic that validates his theories. I watch the progress bar on the screen, counting the slides remaining 5, 4, 3. My heart is hammering against my ribs so hard I am sure the person next to me can hear it. A frantic drumbeat of anticipation. We often hide our trauma, Adrian says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We bury it under floorboards. We lock it in attics. The irony is so sharp it almost draws blood. But, he says, pausing for effect, true healing comes when we drag that darkness into the light. He clicks to the next slide. 2 left. I glance at the exit signs, mapping my escape route, knowing that once the audio plays, chaos will consume this room. My hands are sweating, slick and cold, and I wipe them discreetly on the napkin in my lap. I look at Mr. Henderson, who I just realized is standing in the back near the sound booth, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel in a tweed jacket. He catches my eye and gives a barely perceptible nod. We are ready. And finally, Adrian says, his voice reaching a crescendo, I want to share with you the breakthrough moment. He pauses, looking out at the audience with tears glistening in his eyes, tears on command. His greatest trick, the moment when I realize that love is not enough, that control is sometimes the only form of mercy. He raises the remote, his thumb hovering over the button that will advance the slide to the hidden file. The room is silent, holding its breath, waiting for the inspirational music, waiting for the climax of the sermon. I close my eyes, picturing the red toy car, picturing Toby's face, picturing the bottle of scotch. This is for you, Toby. I whisper silently. A high-pitched squeal of feedback erupts from the speakers, a piercing shriek that makes everyone cover their ears, causing Adrian to flinch and lower the remote. He glares at the sound booth, irritated by the imperfection, and taps the microphone. Technical difficulties, he jokes, recovering quickly. Even machines get emotional. He laughs. The audience chuckles nervously, and he raises the remote again. As I was saying, the breakthrough. He presses the button. The slide changes. The image of the firing neuron appears. And then, the music starts. The sound that erupts from the high-fidelity speakers is not the melancholic elegance of Vivaldi's strings, nor is it the uplifting crescendo of a cinematic score designed to manipulate the tear ducts of the wealthy donors, but rather a harsh, guttural static that sounds like the sky itself is being torn open. A white noise so violent and abrasive that it causes the woman in the diamond choker at the next table to drop her fork with a sharp clatter against the china. Adrian freezes on stage, his hand still extended in a gesture of benevolent offering, his smile fixed in a rictus of confusion as he looks toward the sound booth with a furrowed brow, expecting a quick apology and a correction, unaware that the static is merely the curtain rising on his own autopsy. The audience shifts in their seats, a collective rustle of silk and taffeta, exchanging glances of polite bewilderment that border on annoyance. Assuming this is some avant-garde artistic choice, they are too uncultured to understand. But then the static clears, snapping into a terrifyingly high-definition clarity that captures the wet, slick sound of rain hitting a windshield and the rhythmic, heavy breathing of a man who is dangerously intoxicated. I sit perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap like a dutiful schoolgirl, watching the color drain from my husband's face as the sound of his own voice, slurred and thick with scotch, booms through the cavernous hall. Shut up, Clara. Just shut the hell up. I can drive better drunk than you can sober. The air in the ballroom changes instantly, the temperature plummeting as if a window has been blown open in the dead of winter, and the polite murmurs of the crowd are extinguished by the sheer, vulgar reality of the recording. On stage, Adrian stumbles back a step, his heel catching on the edge of the podium, his eyes wide and frantic as he claws at the laptop, hammering the spacebar in a desperate attempt to pause the file, to mute the truth, to stop the hemorrhage of his reputation. But the file I embedded is not a simple media track. It is locked into the slide transition, a looping nightmare that cannot be silenced without shutting down the entire system. And his frantic tapping only seems to amplify the volume. Please. My voice on the tape begs, a high, thin sound that cuts through me like a knife. Adrian, stop the car. You're going to kill us. Followed by the sickening crunch of metal on metal, a sound so visceral and loud that several people in the front row flinch physically, raising their hands as if to ward off flying glass. Adrian screams at the tech director, his voice cracking. Cut the sound, cut the goddamn sound. But the boy is paralyzed, staring at the screen where the image of the firing neuron has been replaced by a waveform that pulses red with every scream. A digital heartbeat of the crime. Dr. Eris, the man who called me stabilized only minutes ago, stands up slowly, his face a mask of dawning horror, his eyes darting from the man on stage to me, connecting the dots that he had willfully ignored for years, realizing that the hysteria he treated was actually the frantic signaling of a victim trapped in a burning building. The recording shifts to the aftermath. The silence after the crash broken only by the sound of Adrian's heavy boots crunching on gravel and his voice, cold and sobered by adrenaline, commanding me, get in the driver's seat. Clara, move over now. Or do you want to go to jail for killing your son? A gasp ripples through the room, a collective intake of breath that sucks the oxygen out of the space, turning the atmosphere poisonous. This is the kill shot. The moment the narrative flips, the moment the saint becomes the monster. And I watch Adrian's face crumble, the mask of the benevolent healer sliding off to reveal the terrified, pathetic narcissist underneath. He looks at the audience, his hands raised in a plea. "It's a deep fake," he shouts, his voice shrill and desperate. "It's AI. Someone hacked the system. This isn't real." But his denial is drowned out by the recording of him coaching me. "You were driving. Say it. Clara, say you were driving." The hypnotic repetition echoing off the crystal chandeliers, turning his own therapy technique into a public confession of obstruction of justice. I pick up my champagne glass, the movement slow and deliberate, drawing the eye of the woman next to me, who is looking at me with a mixture of terror and awe, as if I have suddenly sprouted wings. I take a sip, the bubbles sharp and cold on my tongue. And then, for the first time since the presentation began, I lift my eyes to meet Adrian's gaze across the expanse of the room. He stops shouting. He stops hitting the laptop. He looks at me. And in that moment, the connection between us is electric and deadly. A silent communication where he sees the fragile wife he planned to discard, sitting like a queen on a throne of wreckage. He sees the calm in my eyes, the absence of the fear he cultivated so carefully. And he realizes with a jolt that nearly knocks him over that I am not the victim of the crash. I am the crash itself. He points a shaking finger at me, his face purple with rage, forgetting the audience, forgetting the cameras, reverting to the abuser he is in the privacy of our home. "You," he snarls, his voice amplified by the microphone he forgot to turn off. "You ungrateful bitch. I saved you, I fixed you." The crowd recoils, the vulgarity of his outburst serving as the final seal of authenticity on the tape, proving that the monster on the recording and the man on stage are one and the same. The doors at the back of the hall burst open, not with a dramatic bang, but with the heavy, authoritative thud of law enforcement. Alerted by an anonymous tip, Mr. Henderson's final contribution to the cause. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit march down the center aisle, their presence cutting through the chaos like a shark fin through water. Adrian sees them, and panic takes over. Stripping him of the last shreds of his dignity, he scrambles backward, knocking over the podium, the wood splintering with a loud crack that sounds like a gavel striking a block. "No," he whimpers, backing away until he hits the projection screen, the image of his own brain scan warping around his body. "You don't understand. She's sick. She's mentally unstable. She did this." The detective steps onto the stage, not with aggression, but with the weary resignation of a man who has seen this scene 1,000 times, and reaches for the handcuffs at his belt. "Dr. Adrian Hale," he announces, his voice calm over the sound of the looping tape. "You are under arrest for vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." The click of the handcuffs is a small sound, barely audible over the whispers of the crowd. But to me, it sounds like the tumblers of a lock finally clicking into place, opening the door I have been banging on for years. The guests begin to stand, a wave of movement as they distance themselves from the stage, turning their backs on the man they were toasting just minutes ago, their loyalty as fragile as the crystal they drink from. Dr. Aris is the first to leave, scurrying toward the exit with his head down, avoiding my gaze, terrified that his own negligence will be the next headline. I remain seated, watching the police drag Adrian off the stage, his feet scuffing against the floor, his eyes locked on mine, pleading, accusing, begging for me to intervene, to play the role of the savior one last time. But I do not move. I do not look away. I simply watch him disappear through the side exit, the flashing lights of the police cruisers visible through the open door, painting the ballroom walls in alternating stripes of red and blue. The tape finally stops as the tech director yanks the power cord from the wall, plunging the room into a stunned silence. A vacuum where the truth hangs heavy and undeniable. I place my glass on the table, the sound distinct in the quiet, and stand up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady, the weight of the fragile invalid persona shedding off me like a heavy coat. I smooth the skirt of my black dress, pick up my clutch bag, and turn to face the room. To face the people who whispered about me in the market, who pitied me, who judged me. They stare back, silent, uncertain, waiting for me to scream or cry or collapse. But I give them nothing. I am not a spectacle for their amusement. I am the author of this tragedy. And the final chapter is written. I walk toward the center aisle, my head held high, the crowd parting for me once again. But this time, the space they leave is not out of pity, but out of fear and respect. I walk past the table where Mrs. Higgins from the market is sitting, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, and I give her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a thank you for the truth she gave me in the flower stall. I walk out of the grand hall, leaving the whispers and the wreckage behind. Stepping out into the cool night air where the valet is waiting with the keys to the car, my car, I take them from his hand, the metal cold and solid, and get into the driver's seat. I adjust the mirror, catching a glimpse of my own eyes, clear and sharp, no longer dilated by fear or medication. I start the engine, the vibration humming through the steering wheel, a sensation of control I haven't felt in years. I put the car in gear and drive away, leaving the estate, the husband, and the ghost of the victim behind. I am not healed. Not yet. But as the wind rushes through the open window, carrying the scent of rain and asphalt, I realize that for the first time in a long time, I am driving. The ocean is a different kind of blue than the pills were. A deep, restless indigo that shifts with the wind rather than the static. Chemical turquoise that used to numb my tongue. And as I stand on the porch of my small cottage watching the waves crash against the Oregon coastline, I realize that I have finally learned the difference between silence and peace. It has been 365 days since the gala. A year measured not in lost hours or missing memories, but in the slow, painful reconstruction of a self that was systematically dismantled. The easel stands in the corner of the sunroom, smelling of turpentine and linseed oil, a scent that used to make Adrian sneeze, but now smells like freedom to me. And on the canvas, a landscape is forming, chaotic and messy, full of jagged lines and dark shadows that he would have criticized for lacking symmetry. I paint the storm now, not just the calm water, because I have learned that denying the storm is what drowns you, and painting it is how you learn to swim. The house is small, a fraction of the size of the estate, with floorboards that creak and a roof that leaks when the autumn rains come. But every creak is a sound I recognize, a sound that belongs to me, not a symptom of madness implanted by a man who needed me to be broken. I walk into the kitchen to make tea, the ceramic mug warm in my hands, and I glance at the newspaper clipping pinned to the corkboard, yellowing at the edges. A small headline buried on page 6 detailing the sentencing of Dr. Adrian Hale to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. He tried to plead insanity. Of course, spinning a web of lies about his own trauma, about being overworked, about doing it for my own good. But the jury heard the tapes, the hours of recordings I found in the floorboards, and they saw not a savior, but a predator. I do not visit him. I do not write to him. And I do not hate him anymore. Because hate requires energy. And he has taken enough of mine. He is simply a ghost now. A bad dream that I have woken up from. His power over me dissolving like sugar in hot water. I sold the estate, the furniture, the jewelry, everything that his money bought. And I donated the proceeds to a legal fund for victims of domestic abuse, turning his empire of control into a weapon for liberation. The only thing I kept was the red toy car, which sits on the windowsill catching the morning light. A small, chipped monument to the truth that saved my life. Today is the day. The anniversary of the accident. The day that used to be a black hole in my calendar. A day Adrian would sedate me through so I wouldn't ask questions. But today, I am awake. Painfully and wonderfully awake. Feeling the crisp bite of the October air as I pull on my coat and pick up the car keys. I walk to the gravel driveway where my second-hand station wagon is parked. A humble vehicle that shudders when it starts. But I love it because I bought it. I insure it. And most importantly, I drive it. The panic attacks still come sometimes. A sudden grip of fear when I see headlights in the rearview mirror or hear tires screeching on asphalt. But I have a new therapist now. A woman with kind eyes who listens instead of commands. Who tells me that fear is a passenger, not the driver. I pull out onto the coastal highway, the road winding along the cliffs, and I grip the steering wheel, feeling the vibration of the engine. A physical reminder that I am in control of my direction, that I can turn left or right, stop or go. And no one is whispering coordinates into my ear. The cemetery is quiet, tucked away on a hillside overlooking the valley. A place of rest rather than a place of horror. The maple trees ablaze with the fiery colors of fall, dropping leaves like confetti on the headstones. I park the car and walk up the path, my boots crunching on the gravel, the sound distinct and grounding. Carrying a bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers, Toby's favorite. Because they look like little suns, I reach the small stone marker, the name Toby Hale carved into the granite. And for the first time, the sight of his name does not trigger a flashback of blood and glass, but a memory of him running in the garden, his laughter ringing in the air. I kneel down, the damp earth staining the knees of my jeans, and I place the flowers against the cold stone, tracing the letters of his name with my fingertip. I'm here, baby, I whisper, my voice steady. Not the broken whimper of the woman on the tape. Mommy is here, and she remembers everything. I close my eyes and let the memory come. Not the false one Adrian planted, but the real one, the way Toby smelled like milk and earth, the way he hugged my leg, the way he looked at me with absolute trust. I reach into my pocket and pull out the red toy car, the metal warm from my body heat, and I place it next to the flowers, returning it to its rightful owner. I kept it safe for you, I say to the wind, and it kept me safe too. I sit there for a long time, watching the clouds drift across the sky, feeling the grief wash over me. Not a sharp, stabbing pain, but a heavy, dull ache that feels like healing. I cry, letting the tears fall freely. Tears that are not chemically induced. Tears that are not manipulated. But tears that are mine, born of love and loss. I forgive myself for not being able to save him, because I understand now that I was a victim too, that I was fighting a battle I didn't know I was in, against an enemy who held all the cards. I am not a murderer. I am a mother who survived, and in surviving, I have honored him more than my silence ever could. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, I stand up, brushing the dirt from my hands, feeling a sense of lightness I haven't felt in years. I look at the grave one last time, not with despair, but with a promise. I will live, I say aloud, a vow to the boy who didn't get the chance. I will live enough for both of us. I turn and walk back down the path, the wind blowing the hair back from my face. drying the tears on my cheeks. I pass an old couple walking hand in hand, and they smile at me. A genuine, warm smile, and I smile back. Not the brittle mask I wore at the gala, but a real, tentative curve of the lips. I get back into my car, the engine turning over with a reliable hum, and I check my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back is older, etched with lines of sorrow, but her eyes are clear, fierce, and alive. I drive back toward the cottage, the headlights cutting through the gathering dusk, illuminating the road ahead. I pass the turnoff to the old estate, now owned by a tech company that plans to tear it down. And I don't even slow down. That life is a closed book, a story written by someone else. And I have started a new volume, written in my own hand, with ink that cannot be erased. I arrive home, the windows glowing with the warm light of the lamps I left on, a beacon in the dark that I created for myself. I walk inside, lock the door not to keep myself in, but to keep the world out, and go to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. I drink it standing at the sink, the liquid cool and clean. And I think about the blue pills. I haven't taken one in months. I don't need to forget anymore. I have my memories, the good and the bad, the sharp and the soft, and they are the bricks with which I am building my future. I walk into the sunroom and pick up the paintbrush, the bristles stiff with dried blue paint. I dip it into the jar of water, watching the color swirl and dissolve, transforming the clear liquid into a cloud of indigo. I touch the brush to the canvas, adding a stroke of light to the stormy sky I painted earlier. A break in the clouds where the sun is pushing through. It is not a masterpiece, but it is mine. I am Clara. I am a painter. I am a survivor. And as the sound of the ocean fills the room, rhythmic and eternal, I realize that the silence is no longer empty. It is full of possibilities. I put the brush down, turn off the light, and walk into the bedroom, where the bed is made only for one. And for the first time in a decade, I lay down and close my eyes, ready to dream my own dreams.